Investors were waiting. Patients were waiting. One missing training record had delayed a billion-dollar launch. Welcome to the Audit Room. I'm Oluwashanu Joseph, and yes, we're talking audits. Because behind every binder, every timestamp, every frantic email chain, there's a story, and if you're leading an enterprise, that story ends in one of two ways: in trust or in the headlines. This isn't a story, this is the real world, where binders break brands and timestamps decides trust. Let's get into it. The story begins not in the laboratory, but in the boardroom. A room with glass walls overlooking a skyline where the weight of 10 years of research sat on the shoulders of a handful of executives. They were days away from announcing a breakthrough therapy, the kind of therapy that doesn't just change a company's fortunes, it changes lives. Billions of dollars had been poured into development. Thousands of scientists had worked around the clock. Investors were waiting. Patients were waiting. The countdown to launch was supposed to be a victory lap. But in the audit room, victory is never assumed. The regulators arrived with their laptops, their binders, their quiet authority. They weren't there to celebrate. They weren't there to pat executives on the back or toast to the future. They were there to test, to verify, to ask questions that cut through the marketing slogans and the investor decks. Questions that reduce a billion-dollar dream to binary answers. Yes, no, compliant, not compliant, launch, delay. See, the first hours, they went smoothly. Batch records were reviewed, quality checks were confirmed, safety protocols were explained. The executives exhaled, believing the hardest part was behind them. Then came the questions that changed everything. Show us the training records for the technicians who handled the step. It was a simple request, a routine request, the kind of request compliance officers hear every day. The training had been assigned, the managers swore it was completed, the technician was on the floor, and the technician was most reliable on the floor. But when the system was queried, the record wasn't there. No certificate, no digital proof, just a blank space where evidence should have been. The compliance officer tried again. Different system, different database, different LMS, still nothing. The manager insisted the training had been done. The technician herself confirmed it. But in the audit room, memory doesn't matter. Intent matters. Proof matters. And that proof was missing. The regulators' expression didn't change. They didn't argue. They didn't accuse. They simply noticed the absence and they moved on. But the silence in that room was deafening. Everyone knew what it meant. Hours later, the verdict was delivered and the launch was frozen. The fallout was immediate. The therapy sat in the warehouse, ready but untouchable. Every day of delay cost millions. Every week meant patients waiting. The stock price dipped, competitors smiled, analysts sharpened their knives, and the board demanded answers. And the CEO, who had prepared to announce a triumph, now faced investors with nothing but apologies. One missing training record had delayed a billion-dollar launch. Think about that. Not a failed clinical trial, not a safety issue, not even a catastrophic manufacturing error. A single missing record. A single gap in the system that was supposed to be airtight. A line of data that should have been there, but it wasn't. That absence became the most expensive blank space in the company's history. The irony was brutal. The company had invested billions in science, but pennies in compliance infrastructure. They had built a machine capable of producing miracles, but the gears of their compliance system were rusted, fragile, and outdated. They had planned for every scientific contingency, but not for the simplest of audit questions. This is what happens when you're using yesterday's method in a world that's moving at a speed of artificial intelligence. You're left behind. The regulator didn't care about the billions invested. They didn't care about the marketing campaigns or the investor calls. They cared about one thing, proof. And that proof was missing. Inside the company, panic spread. Teams tore through emails, spreadsheets, and learning management systems, LMS. They found fragments of evidence, a calendar invite, a sign-in sheet, a supervisor's notes, none of it met the regulator's standards. The scramble was frantic, desperate, futile. The launch remained frozen. At conferences, executives told it in hushed tones. In training sessions, compliance officers used it as a warning. In boardrooms, directors asked same haunting questions. Could this happen to us? The answer too often was yes. Because the truth is, this wasn't just about one company. It was about the entire industry built on fragile systems. Systems that rely on manual uploads, paper sign-ins, disconnected databases, and human memory. Systems that work until they don't. And when they don't, the cost isn't measured in paperwork. It's measured in contracts lost, launch delays, reputations damaged, and careers ended. That's the reality of the audit room. It doesn't matter how much you've invested. It doesn't matter how groundbreaking your science is. It doesn't matter how many lives your product could save. Record isn't there. If the record isn't there, it didn't happen. If it didn't happen, you didn't launch. This is the story of one missing training record. But it's also the story of every executive who has ever believed compliance was someone else's problem. Every board that has underfunded compliance infrastructure. Every leader who has told themselves, that's good enough, we will pass. Her name was Maria. She wasn't an executive. She wasn't a board member. She wasn't even a manager. She was a technician, a quiet, diligent professional who came to work every day, clocked in, followed procedures, and went home. She wasn't the kind of person who made headlines. She wasn't the kind of person who thought her name would ever be whispered in the boardroom. But in the audit room, ordinary people become the center of extraordinary stories. Maria remembered the training session vividly. It had been a Tuesday morning in a small conference room with the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The instructor had walked in, through the slides, explaining the new procedure. Maria had taken notes, asked questions, completed the quiz at the end. She had signed the attendance sheet. She passed. She had done everything right. But when the regulator asked for proof, the system was silent. The database showed the training was assigned, and it showed the due date. But the completion record, the one line of data that mattered, it wasn't there. Somewhere between the classroom and the system, the proof had vanished. Maybe the administrator forgot about it. Maybe the file was corrupted. Maybe the LMS glitched. Whatever the reason was, the record was gone. Maria's supervisor fought for her. He brought in colleagues who remembered her being there. He showed the regulator her spotless work history, her years of compliance, her reputation as one of the most reliable technicians on the floor. None of it mattered. In the audit room, proof is binary. If it isn't documented, it didn't happen. Maria went home that night devastated. She sat on her kitchen table staring at the same hands that had performed the procedures flawlessly, the same hands that turned valves, checked gauges, and followed protocols to the letter. She had done her job, she had followed the rules, yet she was the reason a $1 billion launch was delayed. Well, at least that's how it felt. Her husband tried to reassure her, her friends told her it wasn't her fault, but Maria carried the weight of an entire company's failure on her shoulders. She replayed the training sessions in her mind over and over, as if remembering it more vividly could somehow make the records reappear. She thought about the patients waiting for the therapy, the investors losing money, the executives scrambling. She thought about the whispers in the cafeteria, the sideways glances in the hallway. She thought about how one missing record had turned her into a symbol. But Maria wasn't the failure. The system was. The company's compliance process was built on fragile foundations. Paper sign-ins, manual uploads, disconnected database, outdated LMS. It was a system that worked until it didn't. And when it didn't, the consequences were catastrophic. The irony was cruel. With every day of delay, the company's competitors gained ground. They were already whispering to clients, already hinting to investors, we're ready. They're not. So the CEO sat at the head of the table, listening and absorbing, calculating. He had prepared for tough questions about pricing, about distribution, about regulatory strategy. He had prepared for this. How do you explain to a board that $1 billion launch was delayed because of one missing record? How do you defend the indefensible? And the board members, they were relentless. Who was responsible? But the regulator's stance was the same. It was unyielding. No record, no launch. There was no room for negotiation, no appeal to common sense, no allowance for intent. The company's leadership realized they weren't negotiating with the person. They were negotiating with the system. A regulatory framework designed to protect patients, not profits. A framework that didn't care about excuses, about context, about what really happened. It cared about proof, and proof was missing. How would the company prevent this from happening again? How would they rebuild trust with regulators, with investors, with patients? How would they turn a $1 billion failure into a lesson learned? The CEO didn't have the answers that day, but he knew one thing. The company would never be the same. For years, compliance had been treated as a background noise, something handled by specialists in the corner office, something managers mentioned at the end of meetings, something employees thought about only when a deadline loomed or a regulator appeared. Compliance was a checklist, a burden, a box to tick. But the $1 billion delay shattered that illusion. Suddenly, compliance wasn't paperwork. It was power. It was the difference between launching and stalling, between growth and collapse, between trust and humiliation. So what exactly do we do for our customers at AVACompli? Well, I'll sum it up in 6 main things. First, we have a mobile digitization factory. We dispatch an ACE to any of your global offices, and we can digitize up to 40 years of paper archives in just a few short weeks. So whether you have paper documents, whether you have files, digital, no matter how much you have, we're able to take all of these and digitize them in a few weeks and make them fully searchable and indexed in over 100 plus languages, depending on your needs. So whether you're in the private sector, whether you're in the public sector, we get this done. Secondly, we have our training videos. We'll take these same policies and create custom compliance training videos. And when your policies update, we take these same policies and create new videos, keeping your employees up to date. Then we have our multilingual AI intelligence. So this is your policies, which we train into an AI so that it can fetch and retrieve any question in any language instantly. And then we have number 4, our on-set compliance architect. This is your ACE. AVACompli architect, you will get an ACE that's present at all of your global office during the audits. So they sit with the auditors, they retrieve the documents. When the auditor asks for any information that you have given us, we're able to take everything that we've indexed and show to them the proof that you are compliant in whatever it is that they're requesting. So number 5 is attestation and intelligence. So depending on whether you're private sector, public sector, or how regulated your industry is, we do have federal grade compliance controls. We will discuss this a bit more depth when you are a partner with us. And then we have our white glove concierge. This differs for every business because no 2 businesses are the same. Though we send an ACE to your local site, behind this ACE is an entire success team just for you and your team. So this is our IT techs, this is our digitization experts, an entire team depending on the needs that you have. We are not compliance consults who come and go, give you a set of new rules and regulations and disappear. We're your compliance partners. This means we stay there with you all year long. Every quarter, if you require, we will have our ACE dispatched to you. Different companies will have different needs, and AVACompli is here to complete them. AVACompli is compliance, training, audits, automated, always ready. The company invested heavily in change. They replaced the outdated systems with integrated platforms. They automated record keeping. They created real-time dashboards that show at a glance whether training was complete, whether procedures were followed, whether proof existed. The transformation, it wasn't perfect. Mistakes still happen. But the difference was in the response. Executives listening to this story face the same risk. Somewhere in your organization, a missing record is waiting. It may be a training certificate, a maintenance log, a safety inspection, or a consent form. You may not know it exists. You may believe your systems are airtight, your processes reliable, your people diligent. But the audit room doesn't care about belief, it cares about proof. And when that regulator asks, the absence of proof will speak louder than any explanation you can offer. There is a fix. If your systems are fragmented, your records scattered, your audit plan built on hope, you already know the cost, but the fix is here. AVACompli. Compliance, training, audits, automated, always ready.